The success of any business today depends on how well and how fast its leaders respond to the ever-changing business environment and their ability to reimagine how their company could be rebuilt around innovations, disruptions, and digitalization towards viable money-making business models. This session will explore digital transformation as a tool for businesses to restart their journeys. Our speakers include Debjani Ghosh, President NASSCOM, NV Tiger Tyagarajan, Global CEO Genpact, Sunil Dikshit, MD, New Digital Businesses, BBVA Bank, and Danish Khan, Assistant Editor, ETRetail.
Welcome to Global Town Hall virtual event organized by the Economic Times Business Vertical. I'm Danish Khan from Economic Times Telecom. And the topic of this discussion is digital transformation in the age of pandemic. And we have Mr. Tiger Tyagarajan, who is the Genpact's Global CEO and President, Debjani Ghosh, who is President of NASSCOM, and Sunil Dikshit, who is the Managing Director of New Digital Business, BBVA, which is a Spanish multinational financial services company. So I would like to start this discussion with Mr. Tyagarajan and seeking his view on this term digital transformation, because I know that the definition is different for various industries, various companies. But what is your view, Mr. Tyagarajan, on digital transformation?
Danish, thanks for having me on the discussion. At its highest level, I would say the way we think about digital transformation is changing the way a business runs completely. Leveraging new technologies, new ways of running the business using those technologies. And a little bit, therefore, if you take that broad definition, it applies to every industry. It is not very industry specific. It's reimagining the way business can run to deliver better outcomes, better customer experience, better value for the customer, and therefore, obviously, for the enterprise and the business that's actually doing it. So at that broad level, it's digital, leveraging those technologies, and transform. But the transform is not a small transform, it's a big transform.
I would like to seek Sunil's view, because he belongs to a company which has done some sort of transformation in the past. Sunil, what is your view, and what sort of changes you have brought to the company and the practices that the company has in terms of digital transformation?
I have been at BBVA for last 3 years, but prior to that, I was at BackBase, so two big financial services companies in Europe and probably across the world. And I've seen transformation in both the places. And from that experience, I would say digital transformation is like two-pronged approach. One is, how do you actually take the existing business and fundamentally change structurally the business model underlying that business in order to actually serve your customer digitally. That's the core part of the business. Then the second part of the business is, how do you actually leverage the power of digital and create new business models which never existed before, just because the adoption of technology, adoption of digital has gone up significantly, exponentially in the last 5 to 10 years. So basically, like either doing some co-creation, strategic partnerships, and creating these new products and solutions for the customer, and that creates new revenue streams. So those are the two parts of the digital transformation. One thing we have to remember when we say about digital transformation is it's not purely just taking the existing processes or existing products and taking the manual part of it and converting into digital. That's not going to help. You have to think, in a strategic way, how do you actually change the underlying structure so that it becomes more convenient and it serves the customer in the right way? So that's how I look at the digital transformation.
Sure. Debjani, you have views to share, because a lot of IT companies are closely associated with NASSCOM, and we all know that in India there is a wave of digital transformation. Companies are seriously mulling over digital transformation. So what sort of view you have? How do you see the Indian market and Indian enterprises when it comes to digital transformation?
Well, first talk about it from the IT industry perspective, right? I mean, first, what Tiger talked about, which is the transformation through technology of companies. This has been a concept which we've been talking about for many years now. But what COVID has done is, in the last few months, the pace of transformation has been absolutely exponential. I mean, the kind of change we have seen in the last few months pretty much equals what has been happening over the last few years, right? So the way I look at it from a tech industry, especially the India-based global MNCs in services and BPM that are based out of India, which service more than 75% of Fortune 500 companies, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to become the trusted partner of businesses all over the world. And for me, what I believe, and I'm sure Tiger will add to that later, but I think there are two components, or rather three components, and the third one becomes even more important in the COVID lens. The first is, of course, who has the technology prowess, right? What technology do you have? How are you able to bring that to play? The second one, where I believe Indian companies have an absolute advantage, is the digital mastery, the talent that can turn the technology into magic for customers like BBVA or others and ensure that it impacts their business. And that's where I believe we as a country have a significant edge. We have an advantage. And the third thing that to me is becoming extremely important, especially since COVID, it was always important, but since COVID, it's become even more important, is the whole concept of trust. Trust becomes to me, it's like the currency of the new contactless, hyper digital economy that we are seeing evolve thanks to the pandemic. And I think that's another area where our companies, because of the work, the body of work they have, because of the credibility they definitely have an advantage. And I think these are going to be the three key pillars to shape the way forward for Indian IT.
Yeah, sure. So, Mr. Tyagarajan, do you have a global view on this whole thing? Because as Debjani mentioned, that transformation has been happening, but COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the efforts taken by the companies. Are you also seeing the enterprises taking more efforts and then accelerating their process and the journey to completely transform themselves?
So I think clearly COVID-19 has accelerated, to Debjani's point, the digital transformation that most companies in most industries were anyhow undertaking. Depending on the industry, depending on the competitive landscape, depending on the investment profile available, different companies in different industries had different time horizons for that transformation. That time horizon, and you can pick any number, 5 years, 7 years, 4 years, has compressed dramatically to 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And I'm talking about global enterprises like the ones that Sunil represents. And that's been driven primarily because the customer, whether it's the business customer or the consumer, has no option but to switch to online. So we see 5 trends that are driving this. Trend number 1, shift from offline to online. If in a particular industry, the online penetration was 5%, it's moving very quickly to 15, 20%. If it was already 20%, it's moving to 40, 45%. So in every industry, shift from offline to online. Post COVID-19, I don't think it's going to come back to what it was originally. A little of it will come back. I shop groceries now online. I never used to. When everything opens up, I'm going to go back to the grocery shop, but I don't think I'll go back 100%. I'll go back 20%. So my 80% shift to online is now permanent. So that's number 1. Number 2, shift to the cloud. If you want to go online, you have no option but to start leverage cloud technologies much faster. Large enterprises have, I think, been slower in adopting cloud technologies than they could have been. Now they are jumping in dramatically. Number 3, virtualization. I mean, what is work from home other than virtualization? It's being able to do everything from anywhere and accessing data and doing transactions from any device, anywhere at any time. That's taken off. 4th is doing analytics and creating insights real time on the fly. Now, if you do number 1, which is online, cloud and virtualization, automatically you'll be able to create analytics insights on your device. And by the way, you need to do it because old models have become useless. So you need to create new models because demand and supply are both volatile. And the last thing I'll say is to achieve all of this, you got to change one paradigm and increase the importance of experience, user experience, customer experience, business customer experience. So all of the wrapper around this is experience because you don't want to spend more than a certain time and have any experience other than doing your, watching Netflix on your iPhone. Same experience you want to have when you want to do a business transaction with another business on the phone or on iPad or on the laptop. It's never been that way. It's dramatically moving that way.
Sure. Sunil, have you done some sort of intervention when it comes to digital transformation, bringing in technologies or processes, especially after the pandemic? Have you felt the need of bringing more technologies into play, seeing the need after the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I completely agree what Tiger just said and Dejani said. We are seeing the same kind of situation, same kind of trends, and same kind of drivers, which are important now. But if I have to look at it, I would look at it in, outside in and inside out. So if you look at from outside in point of view, which is how do you actually ensure that your customer experience is exceptional? How do you ensure that the customers which they need or they probably don't know if they need, but they probably need is how do you actually come up with that in a short amount of time? So what pandemic has taught us is that what we have observed in last 3 to 4 months, the amount of customer interactions have gone up almost by 50%. It's like phenomenal. We have been doing digital transformation for last 10 years. We have never seen that kind of uptake, and this is significant, right? So what that actually does, it creates pockets of opportunity. What that means is now the customer segments, which were never able to adopt digital channels, they have adopted digital solutions. And now this is a sticky thing because once you have adopted it, as Tiger said, like he's doing grocery online right now, right? He's not going to go back and start doing grocery back in the shop now because he likes that convenience. So that is what is going to happen. These new customers will stick with the digital part and they are going to demand better solutions which align with their segment, which was not even in consideration before. So that's one part. Now, the question is, how do you actually make that happen and make that happen fast? So that's the capability part, so inside out. So if you look at the companies like BBVA, what we did is very quickly is leverage the power of solutions like cloud solutions, where we can switch and increase or decrease the capacity of the computation or processing or the infrastructure as and when needed, right? The second is the data. I think the data is very important. If we can actually almost do the real-time data analytics, leveraging the power of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all those things, you can tweak your solutions and products in a way which actually aligns with the customer needs, which is what we have been able to do because it's not that we did it only during the pandemic. We have been doing it for a very long time. It's just that it accelerated significantly during this time. Second part of this is, how do you actually take the existing internal infrastructure and use the power of technology to connect with the outside world? So one of the things which we have learned, and probably learned more during this pandemic, is that the customers are not looking for isolated products and solutions, such like, giving current accounts or, mortgage lending, that kind of thing. They are looking for something which is an integrated experience which aligns with their daily lives. So what that means is we connect, we create the link with other companies like Google, like Zoopla, like those kind of players, and create an integrated offering. So for that, we have come up with the open banking. And the third thing, which Tiger also mentioned, is how do we actually ensure that our workforce is ready to actually take that kind of challenge? One thing which I have actually thought through during this pandemic and even before that is, upskilling and reskilling what we say regarding the workforce. I don't think that's like a one-off event. That's a continuum. What this pandemic has done is accelerated the speed with which we can go through this continuum, and which is what is happening. So we are making our workforce even more agile, even more adaptable to all these changes. I think those are the few things which we have observed and have significantly, taken that in a stride.
Mr. Tyagarajan, you mentioned about an example wherein offline to online shift is happening. In India also, a lot of, so for instance, handset sales. People are not ready to go to the offline stores, rather they are buying through e-commerce channels. But at the same time, people say that there is an opportunity for offline retailers to digitize, to adopt technologies. So do you think that, is it the time for them to reinvent all, or there is a chance for them to actually lose their business? And other than that, are there other industries which need to focus on this digital transformation because they are seeing huge business losses if they don't adopt these technologies?
Danish, look, I think everything that all three of us described basically says that the world is rapidly changed, not changing, changed. And it's changed forever. I know people talk about coming back to normal. There's no coming back to normal. It's a new reset. The curve on digital transformation used to be like this, it was growing. It's now become like this. It's not going to slow down. And the base has changed. Anytime you have a change of this kind, people call it disruption, there are going to be winners and losers. That's a given. In every industry, I'm going to say that half the companies are going to win and half the companies are going to lose. Easy math to just do, half and half. The half that's going to win are those going to embrace the new. The kind of things that Sunil talked about. In banking, there are going to be banks that are going to be doing really well in the new, and there are going to be banks that are going to be slower to adopt and therefore lose. If you now talk about the example you gave on offline retailers in the India cell phone market, which actually is very similar to lots of other markets in lots of other countries of lots of kinds. Buying liquor in New York City is a walk-in activity, but no longer, right? So how do stores shift? Now you can't expect every store to undertake a digital transformation project. So in many, many economies, and I took the liquor example because it's happening in the liquor industry in New York City, for example, there are people who are coming up from nowhere, brand new businesses that have got created in 90 days, who are basically saying, I will create the digital platform for 2,000 liquor shops in New York City. You don't have to do it because 2,000 liquor shops can't do it. So I'm creating a payment platform, an onboarding client platform, and a catalog platform, and a pricing change platform. That's all that's needed. And I'm going to have the liquor distribution channel through me. I don't hold any stock. I'm just a platform. So more and more new opportunities for new businesses have got created in the last 90 days. And in today's world, you can actually stand up a business from zero in 90 days. That's actually one of the advantages of digital.
Dejani, what is your view on this, which Mr. Tyagarajan just mentioned?
Well, two things. One is if you take Tiger's liquor example, you're seeing that play out in India. You have companies like Swiggy and a lot of the e-commerce companies, wherever the government's giving them permission, they're going into the liquor delivery business. And these are traditional food platforms. I think what I will just add to what Tiger said is it's the half that will win is not just those that embrace technology, but I think even among them, the leaders that will come out in the new normal are those that embrace technology the fastest. And I think that's the difference we are going to see. Speed is going to pretty much eat everything else out there, because what we're going to see is that if you are agile enough to embrace technology before you get disrupted by a new kid on the block, you're not only going to survive, but you're going to beat your competition. But if you are going to take your time, somebody else is going to come and disrupt your business. As Tiger rightly said, it takes less than 90 days today to start a new business. And especially in India, we are seeing that happening in a few areas. In as a service, if you look at the as a service opportunity in India and the kind of disruption that we are seeing in the SaaS companies, I mean, it's just fantastic to see the kind of new companies that are coming up and how they are disrupting old businesses. In fact, we feel that's one segment in India. Roughly today, it's around 3.5 billion, but we believe that in just the next 4 or 5 years, that has the opportunity to cross 20 billion because of the COVID disruptions we are seeing in that segment.
Sure. So how do you measure the outcomes of these interventions? So what is the criteria of that of the success? So obviously the management which allows digital transformation, but they want returns on their investment on the technology. How do you measure those outcomes? So this is a question for all three of you.
If you broadly look at investment in digital transformation, you can look into something like more transforming the core, which is the existing business. How do you do it well, whatever you are doing? And then the second is creating new businesses, right? Or new business models. So if you look at the core, there it is all about P&L. Then you look at like how efficiently you have been able to serve your customers and how effectively you have been able to increase the revenue from that core business. So that their ROI measurement is relatively easy, even though it's not easy, but relatively easy to measure, because you can look at some of the KPIs, whether, you know, what's the digital uptake, number of mobile customers, digital customers, all that kind of thing. But when you come to creating the new business models, that's not something which you can actually measure in short term, because the value being created here is again a perceived value. You are either investing or you're creating. You are going to see the reason only after 3 to 5 years when this kind of business actually matures. So that's why, you know, sometimes the priorities shift, especially when you have limited amount of money to invest. So the idea comes is like, how do we actually co-create? And that's why the open banking and co-creation and all these accelerators, fintech, all of this ecosystem is coming together, because without this ecosystem, the real creation cannot happen, because no one has unlimited amount of budgets. No one has unlimited amount of investment. So the ROI can never be there. So I think we have to look at from these two lenses.
You know, interestingly, we are talking to a lot of non-IT companies who are talking to us to figure out how do they build their pivot playbooks, right? How do they engage, etc. And if you're looking at metrics, I think the biggest short-term metric that every CEO is looking at is how do I minimize the decline that I am going to see? Because, you know, with the global economy now slowing down, everybody is facing some sort of a decline in revenue, right? And the ranges differ from industry to industry. I think the biggest thing they're looking at right now is how do they minimize the overall slump or the overall decline in revenue, how do they minimize the loss in customer engagement that they are likely to see because of customers not being in physical touch with them anymore. So interestingly, these are, how do they look at employee engagement? That's another huge metric that companies are looking at, because in a remote world, how do they ensure that the employee engagement, it continues to be as strong, productivity continues to be the same, business continuity. So I think these are all the different things that companies are looking at in the short term.
And Dinesh, if I were just to add to what both Devjani and Sunil said, that the two things that we think determine success in digital transformation journeys, and they've both been referred to by both Sunil and by Devjani. One, what Sunil said earlier, we find any time a digital transformation journey is undertaken with the objective of replacing labor with machines, and therefore the count of success that the leadership team of the company decides to use is how much labor is reduced and replaced by machines, and therefore how much cost have reduced. If that is the objective of the digital transformation journey, we find failure rate to be 75%, 80%. Failure rate. If on the other hand, the business says, my objective is to grow, get more customers, get more market share, get better pricing, delight the customer, reduce fraud, reduce losses, reduce working capital, success is 80%. Now, the fascinating thing is when you undertake journey number 2, you also get cost benefit. But if you go for cost benefit, you fail. Because in the end, the cost benefit that you get, the return on investment is not worth it. And then everyone says digital transformation has not worked. No, your objectives were wrong.
I would like to add what Debjani said regarding the customer engagement. This was the real problem actually we also faced, that because we are moving from offline to online, how do we engage a customer in a way that, we have a powerful medium of engaging with a customer in a meaningful way. So that's where we were looking at the interaction, the digital interactions of our customers. And we found that, the number of interactions we have with these customers is limited. Obviously, we are banks, we are not social media where people go every few minutes, right? But at the same time, are we actually producing enough value for every customer interaction the customer is engaging with us? So what we did is we did a study and we looked at how actually this is, in terms of monetization for the customer, is it working? And then we learned that majority of the customer interactions are actually not as valuable because they are just either checking their information or checking their account. So we leverage the power of technology like machine learning, AI, to align with what they could be looking and make the interaction smart. So that's what we did. Like we make the customer interaction smarter, leveraging AI and machine learning. And that was a big uptake in terms of customer interaction. Now they're spending more time with us. Now they are actually getting value out of this. As a result, the output is that there's more cross-selling or there's more efficiency.
Sure. Mr. Tyagarajan, you talked about taking an approach to transform the business and not necessarily to reduce cost. But ultimately, you are deploying technologies like machine learning, AI, and bringing in automation. So that is going to take some jobs actually. So that is ultimately going to give some cost benefit. But is it something, this is a result we cannot deny, because job cuts are going to happen. People are trying to save cost and they're trying to cut costs and bringing in technology. I give you an example. In telecom, for instance, for managed services, there used to be a lot of workforce required. But with the help of AI and machine learning, now they do not need people to go to physically check the site. They can do it remotely. And hence, there are job cuts happening in the telecom sector as well. Are you also seeing, while the intention is to transform the business processes, but this is one element which is bound to happen?
Yeah, so Danish, I don't think you should mistake what I said. Objective is not cost. If your objective is cost, actually you'll fail. I'm just being very extreme. If your objective is labor reduction, in the end, the CEO of most companies will find it's not worth it, because the impact it has on the bottom line is 1%, 2% margin benefit. That's it. And it's a one-time benefit, by the way. On the other hand, if you go for all the other things we talked about, then you'll get that, which is much bigger benefit, and you'll get the cost reduction that anyhow you would have got, which means jobs will be replaced. I don't think there is running away from that. However, 500 years of technology of all kinds that humankind has created has destroyed jobs and created jobs. There's not a single technology that has not done both. Humans have the ability and the entrepreneurial spirit and the creativity to create new things and new solutions that then deploy a whole lot of people. I mean, whoever thought today the demand for the type of skills that are needed didn't exist 10 years back, didn't exist anywhere in the world. And there is a shortage of all of such people in the future. So I think number one, jobs will go away. Really wrong to assume it won't. Number two, it's not easy to deal with that job change. Number three, in the end, jobs will be created. So what's the challenge? The challenge is the transition, which means it goes back to, I think, what Sunil or Debjani, I don't remember who said it, but reskilling. If you ask me the single biggest challenge the world has in this conversation, it's reskilling. You have to reskill people. You have to reskill your own people. You have to reskill people who are entering college. Colleges have to change. What they teach today, I don't think is good enough. The other thing that we've been talking about for a long time is that if the way humans have approached education and work is 20 years of education, 40 years of work, and let's say another 40 years of retirement. That's changed. In my opinion, it changed quite some time back, and now it's pretty clear. It's 20 years of some foundational education. After that, it's 40 years of educating, learning, and working non-stop. That might be every 2 years you spend 2 months getting educated, or it might be every month you spend 5 days getting educated. There are various models. But if I don't educate myself and learn new things every year, every month, every quarter as the CEO of the company, then I will become redundant in about 12 to 24 months.
Right, right. Devjani, NASSCOM works a lot in terms of reskilling or providing skilling to enterprises and engineers and other functions. Do you think that the efforts need to be made now, or are enterprises already taking steps to reskill the workforce in the country?
Needed to be made yesterday, not now. This is the, I think if India has to pick one national priority, which has to become like a mission critical priority for the country to achieve, it has to be the reskilling agenda. And this, by the way, is something we have discussed with the Prime Minister, and he too agrees. He strongly supports and agrees that skilling has to be the most important thing that India needs to do, right? I think, as I said, talent is one place where India, and it's the right place. To me, if we had to have an advantage somewhere, it should be talent. And thankfully, we have an advantage there. See, we have an advantage because in the earlier world, the world wanted people with science and engineering background. And India had a very strong base of engineers and those who had a strong foundation in science and maths. So we had a fantastic advantage. And if you just look at, the number of people who are driving R&D in all the international companies, you will find a large number of Indians. Right? So we've had a fantastic advantage. Now, we have to ensure that we convert that the science and math expertise that we have to digital expertise, which is not just about science, math, technology, but it's also about design thinking, it's about problem solving, it's about communication. All of this has to come together, right? So we strongly believe that, as Tiger rightly said, I mean, the role of schools and higher ed has to fundamentally change. The role of schools and higher ed has to be, one, about building the foundation, and two, building the mindset of learning, unlearning and learning. If you can graduate with a very adaptable mindset, as I call it, you are going to be in the front line to be hired. And that's what companies look at when they're interviewing people. They're not looking at your degrees or how much have you learned, because all of that is meaningless. They're looking at your aptitude. They're looking at your ability to quickly unlearn what you've learned and quickly pick up new things, right? So yes, skilling is absolutely a number one priority within the tech industry. And that's why I talked about digital mastery. And I believe that we have an advantage there because we are investing tremendously in our people. NASSCOM is working with the entire industry to reskill the employees that we currently have. In fact, the government has now jumped in and told us that while you're reskilling the industry, we also want to ensure that this training becomes available to anyone who has a science background or who is an engineer but could be working in a bank, could be working in a hospital, could be working in a retail chain, and wants to learn these new skills because even their jobs are changing. The only thing I'll say differently from Tiger is I don't feel jobs will go away. I feel they will change completely. They will completely change. So therefore, the skills that you and I have today are going to get defunct in the next few months. I won't even say years. I think it's in the next 6 months, 12 months, we'll find that, oh my God, we don't have the right skills to be the best in our jobs anymore, right? So yes, so by year end, we are going to launch Future Skills Prime, NASSCOM Future Skills Prime, jointly with the Ministry of IT, to offer this training to pretty much anyone in India, be it a student or be it an employee in any vertical that wants to get trained on digital skills and move ahead his aptitude, his learning, or her learning in these areas. So that's a huge focus for us.
Sure, sure. Sunil, would you like to add something, like seeing this skill-related discussion? Do you have a view on that?
Yes, in fact, actually, I completely agree with what Devjani and Tiger just said. You know, as Tiger said, like 20, 40, 40, right? When we previously used to say 20 is the foundational education, and 40 is when you actually apply that education, and then 40 is probably retirement. But that 40 is not only applying, it's actually continuously learning while applying. So the education or the skilling or reskilling or upskilling, it is not a batch process anymore. It's not something which you can do one-off. It has to be in a continuum, and which is very important, and have to continuously keep aligning with what is happening in the market and what is required. One of the things which we actually normally use in BBVA, and we are big on this, is one of the quotes from, I think it is from Bruce Lee, where he says like, empty your mind, be formless, be shapeless like water, be water, my friend, which means basically like just become like water and adapt, keep adapting as things actually move. And that is the winning strategy for the workforce. So I think going forward, and probably, you know, for last 5-10 years, since we have actually picked up that model, we have been continuously training our workforce and making sure as we go along, we are continuously learning. So that's going to happen. Otherwise, you know, we will become redundant very quickly, probably in months or weeks or whatever, right? But it is important that we actually continue to keep learning and reskill.
Sure, sure. So Devjani touched upon the importance of our country because we are very strong in the IT domain. With digital transformation and the services that our IT companies can provide, do you see the role, India as a country assuming a larger role globally for enterprises, in terms of helping them adapt to new technologies? Tiger, if you would like to add?
I actually see that happening. I'm an optimist in many topics in general. So stemming from that optimism and stemming from the kind of thing that Devjani talked about, both at the number of large corporations, both companies like us who serve the globe in our industry, but also companies that serve the local economy as well as buy and sell products and services across the globe, multinationals from India. I think the clear understanding of how important reskilling is as an agenda for themselves and for the whole economy is very clear. I think the conversation on reskilling and education is a very strong conversation. And there are a lot of efforts going on. And if it's going to come from the government as a top-down, as a support, then I think it's going to get real momentum. I believe that that one of the core fundamental theses about India is its rising middle class. That middle class has always placed a lot of importance on education, probably more than almost any other country in terms of mass. And that emphasis on education has been actually independent of economic capability of supporting that education for their kids. India has one of the, I think, highest proportion of household income being spent on education, irrespective of economic strata. I mean, we all know of people in India who actually prefer having only one meal a day in order to make sure that the kids get support through education. So I see that as a huge optimist. I see the demand for talent not declining, which is fascinating. Global unemployment is at an all-time high right now. And yet, I think as we think about newer and newer skills, demand for talent will never decline. In fact, it continues to be a war for talent. And that's where India can fill up that space by learning new things. By the way, it's a young population. There is no question that as you get older, if you look at the normal distribution of learnability and motivation to learn, it declines. And part of the challenge for all of us is as we all get older, how do we actually not allow it to decline? And it's possible. You just have to self-motivate yourself. But because the population in India is so young, there's so much opportunity.
Do you also see global companies, global multinational companies seeing India as the destination market keeping or maybe in the landscape of digital transformation, because our industries are also looking at this intervention? Do you see that this whole exercise will offer opportunities to global companies to come to India and help enterprises and various vertical companies?
It's already happening, Danish. If you look at it, India today is the most preferred destination for GCCs, especially for cutting edge R&D. We have the largest number of GCCs who are doing R&D anywhere in the world. That we are the number one. So that's already happening, and there's tremendous potential for growth, for further investment in that sector, especially as companies have seriously begun to start looking at a China plus one strategy, especially high-tech companies. And I think what plays in our favor is talent. First, we have the talent pool which they need, and I think that plays very strongly in favor. Compared to other countries, ease of doing business in India is still relatively better, and it can only get better. Hopefully it won't get worse, it can only get better. I'm optimistic about that. So that is another thing that companies look at. And the third thing which works in our favor is we have a very dynamic and growing innovation ecosystem, the tech startup ecosystem, because and I think Sunil had mentioned this earlier, partnerships is the new norm for companies today. You know, everybody's looking at co-creation, everybody's looking at bringing in new partners, and therefore the availability or access to innovative startups becomes an extremely important consideration for these companies. And India is doing very well on all three counts. And we can, as I say, we can only get better on all three. We will continue to get better on all three. So we already are the most preferred hub for ER&D GCCs. And I believe that we will continue to be the most preferred hub, and the investments will continue to grow as long as we can continue to strengthen these three things.
Sure. Mr. Tyagarajan, would you like to add, given that Genpact is a global company and has a very big presence in India as well, how do you see India's importance assuming a larger role for global companies?
Right, I completely agree with Devjani. I mean, the role that India has had historically hasn't changed. What COVID-19 has done is I think, three things. Number one, the response of the industry, individually as individual companies and collectively as an industry, and the response of the government in support of the industry of all kinds. You know, it's pretty unique to have the entire industry classified as essential services when the whole country was in lockdown. And that was not a big debate with the government. The government said, yeah, makes sense. And I know Devjani, you and NASSCOM led the effort on that. So really amazing stuff done. So when I, as a client, sitting in my global markets, I'm trying to deal with all the stuff that's happening in my economy, in my markets, and my customers. When I have the support of either my team in India as a group that I have, or companies like us that support companies, that response has been noticed. It's a big debate that we have with clients. They love the fact that everyone responded so well uniformly. And it's made them realize that actually it is better to work with companies rather than do things themselves. Number two, companies that have not been in India, but have been in other parts of the world, or used to do it only in their home markets, are realizing that they need diversification. So India is actually now not only a vector to leverage talent, but it's actually a vector to diversify, because I'm not diversified. We've actually been some of the beneficiaries of that, where we've got new business in the last 90 days for that reason. And then the third is, you know, more sophisticated companies who think longer term into the future realize that actually the same raw material skills that we are all investing in reskilling. By the way, they see that, you know, when NASSCOM announces a program or the government announces a program, they see what's happening. They see that the future leverage of talent is going to continue. Whether it's AI machine learning, even today, some of the best AI machine learning talent at the base level in terms of the pyramid comes from India. And it's funny, when we go out and recruit in the US for our teams at senior levels, as chief digital officer, chief engineering leader for our digital team, big consulting groups that actually consult with companies on their digital transformation. And we are hiring a lot of people like that. It's amazing. 40 to 50% of the people who actually apply have an Indian background. It's really funny. But it's obvious why it's happening, because just people immerse themselves in that. There's one thing that I would add to, I think what Debjani is referring to. Education needs to change. STEM is not the only thing that determines success. Science, math is important, incredibly important. Computer science, coding is important. But computer science coding is not the winning recipe. The winning recipe is that combined with understanding design, understanding empathy, understanding change. It's not easy change for customers. So how do you help a customer change? How do you communicate? How do you convince a customer? And I don't think India has spent enough time on those topics at all. How many liberal arts colleges are there in India? I can think of one. So that's a big investment that the country has to make, and all of us in companies have.
Sure. So Sunil, last question directed towards you. You are working in an industry where our industry itself is flourishing, but do you see areas where we need to do more as an industry?
You mean as banking or?
Yes, BFSI, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I think there's obviously always something more to do, but as I see the banking industry or the financial services industry in India, it has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. If you look at likes of Amazon, likes of Facebook, Jio, if you look at Paytm, all of them have created new solutions in the financial services domain. But still, it is very scratching. It's almost like scratching the surface. There's a lot more to do in terms of solutions, in terms of how you can actually open up the financial services. One thing which has not happened, which I think has started happening recently with Paytm and probably with Jio, is that we have started integrating a financial services solution into the non-financial services products and solutions, and which is what is needed going forward. And that's where the whole ecosystem which Debjani was talking about comes into play, because India is not only about a place where you find huge amount of STEM talent which you can leverage for technology, but it's also the stickiness of this ecosystem which is interconnected, which you cannot replicate anywhere else. You cannot just take that and put it in New York or California, right? So you need to actually have that. So that actually gives us the capability. I think that the basic structure is there, the foundation is there. Now we have to leverage this to create a way which it goes beyond financial services, which is what very much needed right now.
Okay.
And in that, I think regulations will play also a big role.
Sure. I think we are nearing the end of this discussion. I would like to seek your concluding views on the topic. We discussed a lot of things, and I think skilling has emerged as a key area which everyone needs to focus on. So maybe any concluding comments, Mr. Tyagarajan, Debjani, and maybe one by one, you all can provide your concluding views and comments.
Yeah, Danish, I think I'm gonna touch on one topic that we haven't touched on today, which I think ultimately determines success for companies. And I would argue, again, I think we need to spend time teaching people how important it is. I believe culture ultimately trumps everything else. I know strategy is important. I know execution is important. But in the end, if you have the right culture in the group, in the business, in the company, you can make a lot of these transformation journeys successful. And that culture at its core is driven by a deep desire to learn, a deep desire to continuously reskill yourself, a deep view that I don't have all the answers. I think Sunil and Debjani both touched on it. If anyone wakes up in the morning and says, I've got all the answers, I think they're going to be in trouble. which means partnerships and ecosystem partnerships is the way you succeed. And if you think about our business is about partnerships. We don't make and sell anything. We help other people make and sell things better. So I spend a lot of time on culture, and I think that's going to be even more important than ever before.
So I think he was asking for concluding remarks. From an India perspective, I believe this is a tremendous opportunity for the Indian IT industry to look at reinventing itself. I mean, it's a golden opportunity that we are getting. And we have to ensure we seize this opportunity to the fullest. As I said earlier, I would focus on 4 or 5 pillars for this industry. The first one, the starting one, is talent, people. We are a people industry. It's all about people for us. And how do we ensure we continue to grow the right? We have to make talent our biggest competitive advantage, I believe, as a country. And I think that's going to be critical. The second one to me is trust. I think trust will have such an important role to play, especially in this after COVID world. And this will determine which are the businesses that win and which don't. And I think we have the advantage of building trust as a core competency. The third one is agility. Can we move fast? Like Tiger talked about, we work very well with government, stakeholders. How do we ensure we move? Because the opportunities that will come now are going to look very different from the opportunities we've had before. So we will need changes in policies, laws, etc., to leverage these opportunities. So it is not just the CEO moving to leverage, but it is the country, the government, everyone coming together and saying, let's create an opportunity for Indian IT, right? So how quickly we are able to do that and how quickly we respond to these challenges and turn them into opportunities, agility is going to be key. And the last one for me is innovation, yes, but I do believe that in it going forward, it's not just about how well you can innovate or how much you innovate, but what kind of problems that you find that will have the deepest impact on people. So I call it a people first innovation. And I think companies that can really adopt the lens of people first innovation are going to find the best and biggest problems to solve. So those are my 4 guardrails that I look at when I look at the future of this industry and what direction should we go in.
And Sunil, from you, any last remarks, concluding remarks?
I think Tiger and Debjani actually mentioned most of it, but I would say for me, what trumps everything is trust and empathy. If you can deliver trust, basically build trust and continue to actually increase or maintain that trust, I think you're a winner. You have that competitive advantage. Everything else is just actually going to deliver that trust. So integrity, reskilling, adaptability, agility, be able to do strategic partnerships, all that actually delivers trust. If you have that trust, then everything else, your ROI, your profitability, your cost efficiency, everything just follows from there. So I think that is one thing which we have to keep top in our mind when we do everything.
Sure. I think let's end this on this note. Hope trust grows within the industry and across the world. And thank you guys. Thank you, Mr. Tyagarajan. Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Debjani, for this insightful session and a lot of learnings from this session. Thank you very much.
Please feel free to visit the Help Center in the lobby to have any of your event-related queries answered. We have an amazing lineup ahead, so stay with us.